Rolling. All right, welcome to the first ever Seattle Bike Blog News Roundup chat.
Yay! All right. I'm Tom Fucaloro, and sitting with me in this video is Kelli Refer, who was most recently a staffer for Seattle City Council member and Transportation Committee Chair Mike O'Brien, and also happens to be my spouse. And we are in our house right now, and the baby's asleep, so we're going to talk about bike news.
And this is Tom Fucaloro. He's the Seattle Bike Blog editor and writer. And we are super excited to be here and have our child be asleep. Should we cheers to that?
Cheers. Okay. So let's get right into our first video. So this story has pretty much broken the internet in urbanist transportation circles. Performance artist named Simon Weckert in Berlin put 99 smartphones in a little red wagon and loaded Google driving directions on all of them, and then just walked down the street of Berlin, the busy central city streets, creating what he called virtual traffic jams. So if anyone knows how, when you see a traffic map on Google Maps, that is generated by user data. So people who have Google Maps up and they're following the directions as they drive, they're sending data to Google about how fast they're going. And if they see a bunch of people all slowing down, they say, oh, there must be some kind of traffic, either an incident or just traffic's bad. And if it gets bad enough, Google will start actually rerouting people to different routes because they want to get them around this traffic jam.
I love that he's on a bridge right now.
Yeah. So he's on a bridge. I think this is actually a block away from Google's Berlin headquarters too, which makes it even better. And the streets are, this is like central Berlin. So, he didn't gather any data, it doesn't seem like, about whether, to demonstrate that it was effective. But if you look at the video, there's long stretches of time where there's just no cars. So, he actually spoke to Vice. I think they messaged or something, it says, and explained a little bit more about what he was thinking. And he had a really interesting take on it.
There's a lot to really unpack here. Do you want me to read the quote?
Sure.
The map is not the territory, but another version of reality, Weckert said, quoting semanticist Alfred, Korbizgsky. One of William S. Burroughs' biggest influences. Data is not always translated to what they might be presented. The images, lists, graphs, and maps that represent those data are all interpretations, and there is no such thing as neutral data. Data is always collected for a specific purpose by a combination of people, technology, money, commerce, and government.
Right?
Oh, that's so good. I feel like there's so much to unpack in this particular story. From being amazing performance art, which just kudos right there. That's great. Fantastic use of a wagon. Also notable.
Our family is very pro-wagon.
Pro-wagon here. Wobbin, I think, is the toddler version of...
Wobbin?
Wobbin? Yeah.
Wobbin?
But yeah, this is great. I think there's a lot to talk about in data and maps, and also the real life implications of this kind of an interaction. The fact that people driving are choosing to drive on different streets, which is something that many of us have probably experienced. I know I've been on what is usually a calm neighborhood street and all of a sudden experienced car after car after car after car. Now, I'm curious as to what's happening, and then I'm realizing there's a traffic jam on a neighborhood street, and all of those people have been diverted to what is my like calm neighborhood route.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just experiencing this the Deef or the result of a traffic jam on another street.
Yeah, and it's this idea that there's the maps application is a virtual space. It's a virtual representation of a real place, but what that virtual representation tells people influences what actually happens in that real place. Like if you're on the ground standing there, pulling a wagon, whether that's through downtown Berlin with 99 smartphones, or if you're pulling a wagon with a toddler in it on the sidewalk in your neighborhood, either way, these maps are influencing what's actually happening. And I think that people, you have a sense that's very benign. The maps is just routing me the fastest way. Isn't it great? Like, what's wrong with that technology?
So useful, yeah.
Yeah, and crap, why is this happening? And this is nothing new about maps. Like, Google didn't invent this concept. Basically, ever since we've been making maps, they've had a purpose, and they've had impacts on what happens in the real world. I like this quote. He talks about maps have the potential as an instrument of power. They substitute political and military power in a way that represents the state borders between territories, and they can repeat, legitimate, and construct the differences of classes and social self-understandings. In this case, it's just traffic, right? Like, I mean, traffic's everywhere, right? But it's sort of telling everyone who's using this application that any street it routes you on is yours to drive on to get to your destination as quickly as possible, regardless of the context of that street.
Right, and that real-world implication is that my calm neighborhood street that I bike with my child on is all of a sudden inundated with a ton of people driving who are just trying to get to the highway on-ramp. And it really isn't the most efficient way to go. It's not the, arterial. It's not the direct way.
Right, it's just like there were enough people with Google open in their cars waiting at the stoplight that the algorithm said, oh, you should turn down this street and you'll save maybe 5 seconds, but you'll probably it'll take longer.
Well, and I think about how that really reinforces the case for some infrastructure needs, like diverters. I think in Seattle, a lot of our neighborhood greenways don't have diverters. And this is kind of that tool that would help subvert this technology and say, hey, this is an opportunity to make sure that the street is staying slow, is staying for people who are local traffic or people riding their bike or walking through, and making sure that it's still a calm place to be on. And I think this kind of technology and this kind of performance art helps really illuminate, this is why we can't just allow, especially a greenway, right? Because all of a sudden all the stop signs are turned the other way and you just get this free pass to go along this neighborhood street that's supposed to be slow. So I feel like that's really an important piece. I also love thinking about ways that we could potentially use this information to subvert lots of kind of map data. What would it be like if everybody on a bus was like, all right, let's put our Google driving directions on. Could you clear out some bus routes and get a bunch of people off the road and be like, all right, sweet, the 70 is finally gonna go quickly. Right. So I'm curious about
or the 8. Could we get everyone to route off of Denny Way to let the 8
fantastic.
through?
Oh wow. There's a lot of opportunities there to be really creative.
And also, it'd be really funny. Could you even organize a bus of people to all just open your Google Maps and just say that you're get driving directions to up the street.
Yeah, I think
and
this
then just
would
hit
be
go.
phenomenal. I think this should just spawn a whole nother layer of people utilizing driving directions in subversive ways. I think that's all I really want to happen. And diverters on greenways. Okay, so 2 things.
Right. All right. So, all right, next story.
Ooh, funding.
So, this was actually back in December, but the ideas brought that Feet First raised in this, I guess it's not bad, in The Urbanist, was they were trying to set the conversation of what should we go into this state funding session thinking about when we're thinking about doing funding, especially since the state is going to be looking at ways to maybe cut transit funding if they want to try to appease I-976 voters who will not be happy if the courts strike down the whole thing. So they want to kind of like, there's pressure to do some anti-tax work in the legislature. And
I actually think we have an amazing, I mean, I-976 is devastating. I don't want to like underestimate that in any way. But I think we have an amazing opportunity here to look at transportation funding and really think about it strategically. And I think one of the situations that Washington has really gotten itself in is we don't have a lot of good mechanisms for stable transportation funding. We're looking at a lot of levies, especially in Seattle, and levies are really sold to voters with capital projects, right? That's new stuff. Everybody loves new stuff. No one likes to do maintenance work or operations work, and that's actually super vital to the ongoing benefit of all the things that we've previously invested in. And so projects like highway expansion are really expensive, really budget heavy, and are they actually moving that many people? Are they actually doing the kind of work that we want to see happening in the state for transportation? Are they getting more people to where they want to go? Are they helping meet our climate goals? Are they helping create places? I'm going to just say no. I don't know if that's a bold statement for the Seattle Bike Blog, but no, highway expansion isn't helping us meet any of the goals that we really have.
Well, I think the problem is that we just have there's one too few lanes on every highway.
Wow, really?
So if
just one too few?
If we just do one more lane...
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's
you're from Missouri, so you would think that.
Ouch, Missouri slam.
Sorry. No, but seriously, I think like we are at an amazing opportunity here to really rethink how we do transportation funding. And there's a lot that needs to happen in the legislature. I think it's time to maybe switch over to the transportation choices.
Sure. But did you want to go through any of these points?
Oh, yeah. I think really thinking about the number of people moving through projects right now, kind of going back to our first piece on data, like right now a lot of data is based on vehicle output rather than people output, and we don't have as many mechanisms to capture the number of people walking or biking or the number of people taking transit through any given road. It's trying to think about how, what are efficient projects that are actually moving more people. And so that's one really good metric to think about whether a project should be funded or not. Also, I really love the piece of prioritizing safety over speed. We're not about moving people quickly, we're about making sure that people arrive safely. Or that's what I hope if we're really trying to get towards Vision Zero or Target Zero. And then looking at maintenance, again, sort of what I was talking about earlier, it's really sexy to fund new stuff, but like, are we going to take care of anything that we've already built?
Right. Well, and then there's the whole problem of when we build new freeways, historically, we had built them not where rich people's homes were, but where poor people's homes were. I'm sure it was a coincidence that every city did that.
No, it's not a coincidence at all. And that folds into equity, a very important piece of as we're looking at transportation funding. I think paratransit is one of those places where it becomes really obvious. There are people who rely explicitly on transit to get around. And I think it's really frustrating being in the transportation world and seeing that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, not everyone can get around by bike. It's like, sure, but not everyone can get around by car. There's a lot of people who are relying very exclusively on living in a walkable neighborhood or having access to paratransit or other mobility options, and we should be prioritizing those people's needs first in our funding.
Yeah, and that argument's always made me really frustrated because there's no, if a bike lane goes in on a street, it doesn't limit someone's ability to drive, take the bus, or walk. Like, it's not, a bike lane going in doesn't mean you have to bike now and you don't have another choice.
Yeah.
But there are lots and lots and lots and lots of places where the whole road is for cars, and if you don't drive, then you're not allowed to get around.
Yeah.
And, you know, this idea that, well, bike lanes are exclusive because not everyone can bike. I'm like, well, sure, like, not everyone can bike. That's true. But we're not building infrastructure where that's your only option. Where there are places, even in Seattle, where if you're not driving, you're at a huge disadvantage, you know, but for access to food, access to jobs, access to recreation. If you don't have a car in certain parts of the city, then you just don't get as much of any of that. Access to education as well. So, you know, it just frustrates me when I hear people say, well, not everyone can bike. It's like, well, yeah, but we're not forcing everyone to bike. Like, you know, we're getting slivers of road space so that the people who are biking are safer, and so that other people who don't bike yet can say, whoa,
maybe
I
would
would
do this.
I would actually bike there. That doesn't look terrifying, the way that, you know, but who would never mix with the all-car road that we're also familiar with. Anyway, rant over. So, do you want to...
Oh, there's a lot going on in Olympia right now. It's really exciting. There's some pretty big stuff going on. Let's talk about Block the Box really quick. I know we're about to scroll on. It's amazing. I think we really want to see this one passed. Rooted in Rights has done some amazing videos that if you haven't taken the time, you should definitely check out. Really looking at what it means when crosswalks are blocked by people driving in cars and the safety challenges that poses for all kinds of people, and especially folks with wheelchairs and walkers and limited mobility. That has a lot of potential to just literally save lives. Very, very, very important work. Transportation for All, super exciting as well. Just really looking at the opportunity to ensure that the projects that are going to be funded are the ones that are moving people. So I think that's pretty vital here as well. And then like really looking at how are we going to fund transportation. This kind of gets into a bigger theme in the post I-976 world, but the road usage charge is one particular option. Just seeing how we can charge people for their actual use of the road. I think it's pretty ironic that people biking are often accused of not paying their fair share, when in full truth, it's really people who are driving are not really paying for their toll on the roads, their toll on the environment, the toll on our communities.
Or in the toll on literally the infrastructure that we're paying for.
Right. There's a lot that isn't being factored in.
If gas taxes and vehicle license fees covered the entire cost of driving infrastructure, and then also the harm that driving causes, a gallon of gas would be completely unaffordable. So we subsidize it because that's politically expedient, but at extreme detriment in so many directions. But it leaves people with this idea that, oh well, you know, there's tax on my gas that must cover everything, right? Which that's not reality. It turns out you're paying for car infrastructure, whether you drive or not. Because so much of it has to come through other means, sales taxes and property taxes.
Well, and gas tax is really tricky right now, right? Because for boon to some parts of our environmental consciousness is that a lot of cars are becoming electrified or better gas mileage. Well, that's great. That still doesn't provide us with a stable revenue source for our transportation. And I think that's kind of this fundamental problem that Washington is facing. And I mean, I think one of the big things is really looking at we need a more stable revenue source for transportation as a whole, where we're not trying to identify behavior that we're trying to eliminate and taxing that. We actually just need something that's going to be ongoing and not diminishing. And that's really kind of the kicker for our transportation funding as a whole. And also, I think there's this desire in the state legislature to see transportation benefit districts get a little bit more leeway in the types of funding that they can incorporate to fund important and vital programs like paratransit. For some counties in Washington, it's their entire transit is funded through vehicle license fees. So we're seeing places where like their whole transit subsidization is through that source of income. And I think right now we're having this conversation of what is a sustainable source of transportation funding, and we need the state legislature to take bold action and actually prioritize transit and prioritize multimodal investments that move people.
Yeah. Well, and I think you got into what might be one of the legal arguments against I-976, which is that it was doing multiple things at once, which is you're not allowed to do that when you write a ballot initiative. So, for example, someone might have voted against or voted for I-976 because they were mad about the way Sound Transit was valuing cars when they calculated their vehicle excise tax as part of the Sound Transit 3 package. People didn't think it was fair. Their cars were being overvalued, way significantly beyond what they could possibly sell it for, and they felt like that wasn't fair. And I don't completely disagree with them. You thought you were going to pay one rate, and then you're like, oh, well, I pay way more if you think my car is worth, way more than it is. But so if they vote for it for that, they might not be thinking like their goal in that vote is not to, well, I want to completely decimate, a transit system in a county, 100 miles away.
Or even just in King County and in Seattle, I think, like, in the ferry system, everybody loves the ferries. Nobody really, come on, who wants to cut ferry service?
Yeah, and
if you knew that your vote was going to have all of these impacts, would you have still voted that way?
Well, it's hard because, it's one of those things where the reason you're not allowed to do that is because you could feasibly create an initiative that 40% of people like this part of it, and 40% of people like this part of it, and so long as there's enough overlap, you might get 51%. But really what you've done is you've combined two losing arguments and you've made them into one winning one, and even though it actually turns out that the majority of the state hates both those ideas. But so that's why you're not allowed to combine things. It makes sense that's against the rules.
Or you sneak weird stuff in.
I think it's weird that you're allowed to put initiatives on the ballot that would be illegal. I feel like there should be a check process before where maybe we should have this court battle before it goes on the ballot.
Yeah.
Because it's weird to have everyone get all worked up and go vote on it and then we do the lawsuits. But maybe there's no other way to do it. Maybe that.
It depends. There's lots of different ways. There's so many different models of government, this is not the way it's done everywhere. But that's a whole nother. We don't need to drive into that.
But that
anyway, you should scroll down to the action alert.
And that is exactly why, though, you should do this action alert. Because, so if you go to Transportation Choices Coalition and check out their dispatches from Olympia, so they keep posting these as news evolves during the session. And they'll let you know if they need you to contact any senators about it. An issue people need to be hearing about your support. For example, this one is, oh my god, can I even read this? There we go. A host of bills have been introduced that would strip Sound Transit of revenue and put essential transit projects at risk for cuts or delay. So you can hit this little button and let's see what it does. Oh, look, a handy form, kind of tells you what you're supporting. You just fill it out, and it automatically sends it to the correct people. Pretty neat. And you'll probably end up on an action alert list for Transportation Choices Coalition, which you should join.
And they're doing really great work. I think right now, I mean, especially this year, it feels like a really important year to be following what's happening in the state legislature and figure out how we're going to move forward. There's some really big fundamental questions about what we're going to fund, how we're going to fund it, and what we're looking for. And I think this is the year to take action. This is the year to call your representatives and let them know what you're feeling, what you're thinking about this, and know that this is an important issue to you and why.
Yeah. And also, this is a short session. So if you remember last year, it kind of went on and on and on and on and on. So if you're thinking that you can wait, you can't wait. Like you have to
do it now.
You have to take action right now.
Urgency for real.
The session's going to end way faster. It's not a budget session. So you don't delay taking action. This is not one of those sessions that's going to go on and on. All right, let's talk about Belgium.
Ooh, let's get out of this country.
So,
zooming out.
Yeah. So street films. If you are not familiar with street films yet, well, then I got something to tell you. Street films is amazing. You can get completely lost in there. They've been going on for so long. They just make these concise, informative, optimistic videos about the ways that our public spaces could be different and our streets could be different. And they go and they highlight places that are doing interesting things and talk to people and ask them questions about how they did it, basically. It's just the way that they spread information is just... I think few sources of media have probably had the impact that street films has had, just because a lot of these things you just need someone to film it and explain it to you, because you can't visit all over the world to actually see these places yourself, and they just make it so digestible.
So let's do a really eco-friendly way of traveling to Ghent, Belgium.
Yeah.
We have an area where there are 7 parks. There's a car-free zone in the center, and then 6 parks around it. For pedestrians, for cyclists, for public transport, nothing changed. But for car drivers, something changed. If they wanted to go from one
Yeah.
park to another park, they had to go to the ring road. There was no connection between the parks possible with the car. So you get fewer
This is the same kind of system Groningen has, right? Like a ring road.
But this is a much larger city.
Yeah. Like a real city. No offense, Groningen.
It's adorable.
You're so cute.
Section you have it crossed via this runway. This means that you see a lot more cars here.
Since the circulation plan has been
Okay, and this part's really interesting too.
absolutely a decrease in the number of cars in the city, an increase in walking and cycling. It also goes hand in hand with the parking measures that have been introduced. So we have more parking on the border of the city and people just walking or cycling or using public transport to enter the city.
Yes.
The circulation plan was actually part of the mobility plan that also included the parking plan, the plan to enroll a cycling network in the city of Ghent. And the targets within the mobility plan were set on 35% of cycling in 2030. Now, 2 years after the circulation plan, we have a home share of 35%, which was actually the target for 2030. So
Yes.
It's pretty good.
rethink about the target.
Oh my god.
Standing at the Compure, which is the busiest bike street in Ghent. And before it was too narrow, like you see in this narrow passage on the side, people were biking there. It became impossible to pass in both directions. So now bikers are driving on the street, just beside there. And they've got the whole street for them. It became a bicycle street by law also, which means cars can't overtake bikers anymore, so they have the whole space in the street just for them. Speed limit is 30 km/h.
So, I think something that here. Let's bring our names back up. In case you forgot who we were. I really love that concept that, you know, it's hard to imagine how we could do that here because it would just be so foreign to so many people who drive that I think we should try it at some point. But, you know, the idea that we could have streets where you're not allowed to pass, like you just can't pass. Like if there's someone biking in front of you, you just go behind them. You just don't pass. Like,
I'm going to go a step further. I think there need to be streets where you're not allowed to drive.
well, yeah, sure.
But I think that's actually closer than we think, right? Like, so I love the whole concept that it took a lot of planning and a lot of intention to get mode shift. And I think we've seen cities do this again and again. Vancouver is our nearest neighbor. They've had amazing mode shift. And it's because they did the hard work of making safe bike routes, prioritizing transit, and making it easy and accessible to walk. It's not a secret formula. In Seattle, you'll often hear this line, not all modes can fit on all streets. It usually comes in the context of saying, like, we can't have bikes and buses and cars and pedestrians all on the same street.
So
and then
bikes
we're
are
going to kick the bikes. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, so I agree with you. Not all modes can go on all streets. And let's do some car-free streets for real here. There's so many places in the city where it makes a ton of sense. I think downtown is where people start to envision it. We don't have to start downtown. Like, Seattle loves neighborhoods. We have amazing neighborhoods. Ballard Ave is, like, the best business they do all year is during their seafood fest. That's when the street is shut down. They have their neighborhood farmers market on Sundays. That's a vibrant, amazing, like, destination spot. We're going to have light rail in the University District. We can have some car-free streets there. I would love to see some places in Columbia City and Beacon Ave. Like, those neighborhoods could use some activation on these streets where, especially like in Columbia City, Rainier is a practical highway going through the neighborhood. So what if we find some streets where there can just be open, people walking, biking, and enjoying the neighborhood?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone watching this ever got to go to the old summer streets that used to happen on Rainier Ave, and it was accompanied by there's another festival that happened, and they just kind of like combined
it was like
them.
the Heritage. Was it the Heritage?
Yeah, Rainier Valley Heritage Festival. Is that what it was called?
I can't remember the exact title.
It was awesome. I mean, it was just so wonderful. So you just had the stretch of Rainier Ave through Columbia City, and it was car free, and there was a parade. You know, Bike Works would do like a bike parade, and like, it was just so much fun. People would just kind of party all day, like in the street, and it just kind of showed you like, yeah, like this doesn't have to be just full of cars stuck in traffic all the time.
And I
this
think
can be different.
I think like our neighborhoods, like people talk about what makes Seattle unique, and it is our neighborhoods, and I think that's a great place to start in removing cars from some of these vital business districts and really allowing restaurants and cafes to open up, really expand upon that streetery concept and just say, hey, let's have more tables. Let's create more space for people to enjoy their coffee or have a nice pastry or what, you know, like we've really got some space to work with and not keep people on the margins.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing that, you know, the city tried this in the Pike Pine.
Yeah.
And they did, I think it was Pike Street. They made it car free for, you know, random days.
Oh yeah,
like
I
2 years
kind
ago
of
or
forgot about Capitol Hill. I'm sorry, I'm old. But like, yeah, no, Capitol Hill's got tons of
Remember that
places
place?
where, yeah, we used to live close there. But yeah, there's so many options.
And I feel like, you know, people took advantage of the car free Pike Street, but I think what it was missing was like I want it to be filled with like I want there to be like
Tables.
cafe seating with
Yeah.
you know people going out and serving people drinks and meals in the middle of the street. Like I want like it to be a place you go because you know you'll have a nice way to just like enjoy yourself and enjoy your community, and
A place you can stay, right?
it's a place you can stay, a place where there will be space for you. Like, Capitol Hill, like, again, we're old. Sometimes like, oh, I don't want to go to Capitol Hill, like everything's so packed. Like I'm so old, like I
really want a table.
I need a table. I don't know if I'm gonna get
we
one.
need to sit down.
Like I can't like do this, in a crowd. Like I mean, I can, but I would like not to sometimes.
Yeah.
But like, so when you can be outside, and you can be at a cafe in the middle of the street. I mean, there's so much space to be used for just like people being able to just exist out there. And instead, we just have, basically just an endless stream of, ride hailing cars driving up and down, picking people up and driving. Which
there's just a lot of room to play here, right? Like, there's a lot of space to say, where can we be creative and where can we do something fun that makes it unique and Seattle focused, right? Like, we don't need to be Ghent. We don't need to be Grown Again. We don't need to be any other city. We can be ourselves, but how can we use the space we have and just show off what we've got? The other thing I love about this video, I'm like a huge protected bike lane fan, but I actually love this concept of just having a cycling street, because I think it's kind of where greenways are wanting to go, but aren't at this point. I think a lot of as sort of looping way back to our first video, is that a lot of people get diverted onto greenways who are driving, and they're not actually pleasant and slow streets. And I think there's a lot of space to just say, hey, a really good option for some of these streets is actually just making it a total bike route.
An interesting place to experiment with this might be Bell Street.
Yeah.
In Belltown. This idea that, I think like the problem with greenways, the way that we have them now, is that, well, there's a couple problems. One of them is like we have this double-edged sword of we have the really skinny streets and then we do parking on both sides, which is really, really, really effective at slowing traffic. Like there are other cities that drool over the
It is handy, yeah.
Like our Seattle's collision and injury rate on non-arterial streets is so low compared to like basically any other U.S. city. Like we are, and it's because of it's just so skinny. Like we're not afraid to create a street that's two-way, but there's not actually room for two cars to pass.
And you just have to wait.
And you have to do that negotiation thing. Like that whole annoying negotiation thing
is safe.
Yeah, that's what's making the collision rate go down. The problem is that if you're trying to bike down that street, that's also not always comfortable. If you get someone behind you who's impatient, maybe Waze has told them that this is a faster route to the freeway, and then instead they get stuck behind you, biking with your kid, up a hill, and you're on a side street.
We're just trying to go to the playground, man.
And like, there's not enough room for them to pass you safely, but they might think that there's room, and they think you're being rude, but for not getting over. And it creates this like stressful conflict that doesn't need to be there. And it would be amazing if we could somehow create the social norm and understanding that on these streets, you just don't pass. Like you can't, you just cannot pass.
Diverters. Sorry, I just think that's
or you
really
cannot get
what
through.
we gotta do.
Sure.
I love the idea of like an American cultural consciousness raising, where all of a sudden we really respect everyone's needs to move at their own speeds and desires. Yeah. Love the idea, and in reality we need some diverters. So there you go.
We have to force them to love.
Chill out. I also think like this idea of like protected bike lanes being bike infrastructure is always a little bit false, right? Like, I don't actually need a protected bike lane. You who are driving in your SUV, you are the one who needs a protected bike lane. So then we're not negotiating the same space. And I think it's that that sort of realization of like the protected bike lane is a wonderful tool for a city that has a lot of people driving and has a lot of roads that are getting people to main business districts and are sharing space and making it safer to share space. But in a different world, we can just have some streets that are really focused on transit and some streets that are really focused on people walking and biking and some streets that are focused on cars. But I think we have yet to make that leap in Seattle to say this is a street that's for a car. And this is one that isn't.
Right.
Maybe it's the isn't.
The
isn't.
I was going to say, well, we've done that.
Right. This is the isn't, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I like the idea that, so legally speaking, an 8-year-old should be able to bike down the middle of the lane all the way down Rainier Avenue or Aurora or
no
Lake
parent's
City
gonna
Way.
let their kid do that.
But legally, an 8-year-old has every right
yeah.
to bike, just ride their bike down, just take the whole lane all the way down Lake City Way.
And that person in the SUV behind them is going to call
And
CPS.
And that... which is illegal. You cannot operate your phone while driving. But everyone... So, yeah, in a perfect world, like, everyone driving will, like, respect that kid's right and will slow down and pass according to our new passing law, which means that they have to change lanes completely to pass.
Or just wait.
Or just wait if they can't. Like, that's what the law says now. In a perfect world, everyone would just do that and it would be perfectly safe for that 8-year-old to just bike down Lake City Way. But that's not the world that we have. And it's not the person biking who needs infrastructure. It's the person driving that needs infrastructure to enforce them to protect that person biking and their right to be there. And I feel like we constantly think about that backwards.
Oh, yeah. It's like, if you are an entitled bicyclist, you want this lane. It's like, no, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for you. So you don't kill me. I don't know.
I do want to not die.
I also want to not die.
Speaking of which, should we go on to our next story?
Oh, God. Let's...
Okay, this one...
is heavy.
So
okay.
This one's all the way from April. But it is...
April of last year.
April last year. It's not honestly news to a lot of people, but it's presented in a very good way. It's about this...
No. Okay.
You want to go?
Yeah.
I can pause
I'll
it.
pause it.
All right, time out.
Yes.
Unpause recording. Hey, okay.
Hey, we're back. We're about to talk about something kind of heavy, or at least it feels heavy to me.
It's extremely heavy because there's a lot of these SUVs in the world, and they're not going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
And yet, this is what they're like. Let's play the video and then we'll
Okay.
talk about it.
Can you see him?
No, I can't see any of them.
Lindsay Berry drives a Cadillac Escalade.
Oh my goodness.
The
It's like a preschool class, you guys.
even bigger.
That is so scary. I can't see any of them.
A dozen kids, and she can't see any.
This is just mind blowing. I can't believe.
Not until child number 13 lined up in front of her SUV could she see the very
Oh my
top
God.
of his head.
But yeah, I can't see any of the other children at all.
The
Oh my
size
God.
of that blind zone. 15 feet.
15 feet.
I have no idea this blind spot is.
The good news, there is technology that can help.
Oh, boo.
Oh, yeah, blah, yeah. Eventually we'll put cameras on.
Okay, blah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about this before the... Sorry, I'll refrain some of my language that I want to spew out here. This freaks me out a lot. I think, like, as a person who has a small human being and walks with them in our neighborhood, I think a lot about who can see her. And, like, she just doesn't even come above the hood for, what do you think, like, 50 to 80% of, that's, like, a really large swath of percentage, because I don't know. But, like, a huge amount of cars cannot even see our kid.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's like we were talking about directly before this, like, our streets would be, it's the idea that like our streets, no one would ever get in a crash or ever get hurt if everyone obeyed every single law perfectly when they're driving.
Right.
And that's unrealistic. The whole concept of Vision Zero says that is unrealistic.
Right.
And you can't just keep putting this on individual behavior. But then you get something like this, it's like, literally, if you can't see someone, then, like, you literally, it is impossible to see them. Your car is in the way. Your car is designed in such a way that removes your ability to make the correct decision. So that's like, these people who buy these cars think that, oh, I'm up high, I can see really well. Like, that's something that everyone says. Like, there's a couple people in the video who say that. Completely.
Yeah.
But up high is not where
I'm feeling safe,
other people
right?
are.
I think that's the other thing is like, I've been thinking and reflecting a lot about perceived safety. And I think about like, as a woman who bikes alone at night, I used to do it a little more frequently before we had a child, but like still fairly often. People ask you all the time, like, how do you feel safe doing that? And safety is something that can feel so personal. And then there are these moments when it kind of takes you out and realize, like, oh, safety also has this other connotation of, like, the safety ratings of these vehicles has nothing to do with the people outside of the vehicle. It's only about the people inside. And
so this, whenever you see those like 5-star crash test rating in Europe, cars safety rating includes the concept of what about someone that you hit, so like pedestrian safety, which is why if you see like European cars are often much more snub-nosed and the windshield's closer to the front and stuff like that, because visibility is how you get the good rating over there. In America, it does not. It doesn't factor in, like, that 5-star rating does not in any way at all include you walking across the crosswalk. Like, you are not a factor in that star rating at all in any way.
Well, and I think there's just so much heartbreak associated with this trend in like SUVs and bigger vehicles, and thinking about the number. I mean, to me, it's just like, it really hurts to think about the number of families who have lost children because they've been run over by a car in their driveway. I think that
by a parent,
relative or parent.
Or in this story,
yeah.
Oh, there's a heart. Let's watch it. Let's watch it. It's really heartbreaking, but I think it's important to see.
I
don't remember exactly. Oh, here it is.
Oh my god. Oh. It's gonna kill you guys.
I know, it's so bad.
Just as dangerous.
Can you even imagine killing your own child because you couldn't see them?
Jeanette Fennell founded Kids in Cars. The national organization is trying to raise awareness about the dangers of what it calls front-over accidents, when a child is struck by a slow-moving vehicle because of a front blind zone.
Very few people understand that exists and that there's a huge danger.
That danger is very real. A front-over accident killed a 7-year-old boy in Mishawaka, a 2-year-old girl in Indianapolis, and this 15-month-old toddler near Evanston.
It was seconds, and it happened.
Erica Boyer says her son Noah was playing outside at his grandparents' house when he wandered into the driveway to get a basketball. At that same moment, his grandfather was moving his truck forward so the kids would have more room to play.
My dad had no idea what had happened. Didn't see him. I was greeted by 2 sheriffs and a state trooper. And I said, just tell me that my baby's okay. And they said, we can't do that.
Tragic cases like this are becoming far too common. Kids in Cars says the number of front-over accidents has skyrocketed, with an average of 58 children killed and now more than 3,000 injured every year. And yet...
So, I mean, this isn't abstract. I mean, it's one of those things that news stations, it's a phenomenon I've observed. So I've been writing this blog for the past 10 years, and I've been very tuned into what other media are writing about anything transportation related. and there's this thing will happen where like the scanner will say there's been a life-threatening injury, whatever, of a child. And so the news stations will send out the copter, and they'll go and they'll go to usually it's a cul-de-sac or something, or someone's driveway, and there'll be this really short bit where the news copters are hovering, and they are just there to get the footage of there's been some sort of terrible thing. And then once like news breaks that it was a kid and it was probably a relative that hit them, everyone just goes away. The copters fly back and no one wants to talk about it because it's so horrific, and it's hard to think that like reporting it is going to end in justice because like the person who did it is in hell now. They're in pure hell, and sure, they're responsible, but that doesn't, like, we don't need to hold anyone responsible for this because it's the most horrific thing that could happen. And so we just ignore it, and I think that's dangerous to ignore it because it creates, like what happens in this video where there's all these people who own cars that have this vulnerability, and they have no idea it's dangerous because we don't talk about it.
Or they think they're doing the right thing, which is, I think, the, like, twisted part of this is that people in big cars feel like they're being safe, that they're doing the safe thing by having this car that feels good to them. And I think to have this realization that, like, you could have, 13 kids in front of you before you saw a child, like, that's horrific. And it really shifts your perspective on, like, what messages were being sold about safety and, like, whose safety is at stake. And it's heartbreaking, and it's scary, and it's also really real. I really appreciated the pedestrian safety crisis. What's her name? Can't remember the woman who was talking about it.
Oh, Angie Schmidt?
Yeah. But talking about, like...
She's writing a book about it.
Or
I think her first draft is already in.
We'll see it soon. But, like, thinking about where in your body things are hitting, of, like... I've started to think about that all the time in front of cars that I cross, of, like, oh, this is hitting my hip, or this is hitting my, like, vital organs. And then with your child, it's just like, well, my whole child. And that's a horrible thought to have, but also not having it doesn't help the cause either. It's all terrible, and it's hard because I think there are so many people who don't want to think about their choice of, like, buying an SUV as part of the safety problem.
Yeah. I mean, the pedestrian safety crisis in America is correlated with SUV sales. It's pretty simple. SUV miles traveled correlates with whether or not people walking are killed. Then the car manufacturers are aware that SUVs are more deadly to people walking, and they don't care, and they're not doing anything about it. The Free Press in Detroit did a groundbreaking piece on this like 2 years ago, I want to say, and they discovered not only that SUVs are correlated with pedestrian deaths, but also that the car companies know about it. And to me, this should be front page scandal. Like, if we didn't have a complete bumbling racist wad of garbage in the White House, this might have been a bigger story.
Somehow didn't get impeached.
Who somehow didn't get impeached. Well, he got impeached,
but not
he didn't get removed. But a major business in America is complicit in deaths and they continue to sell these cars because they make a larger margin on them. I mean, so you might have heard, like, there was that, this is the thing that blows me away. So a lot of the costs of making a car are sort of fixed no matter how big the car is. So
It's like houses. Sorry.
kind of like houses, honestly. It is. It's a lot like houses. You know, there's just like, you know, every car has to have the safety features. Every car has to have axles and tires and wheels and engines and like steering. Like, there's so many things that are going to be in a car no matter what. But as you grow the car, you can sell, your costs of manufacturing don't go up nearly as much as the margin you can put on top. So you can sell an SUV for so much more than a sedan, even though your cost to produce it wasn't that much more. And that is why car companies are pushing SUVs so much. It's like you saw, like, Ford is trying to kill off the Ford Focus, and may have killed off the Ford Focus. I forget if it's killed.
I'm not the one to ask about cars.
It's either killed off or they're trying to kill it off, something like that. And it's not because the Ford Focus wasn't selling, and it's not because people don't want that size of car. It's because their margin is smaller, and they want to have as many of the cars that they sell be at the highest margin level possible, and that's SUVs. So the thing driving this is not pure customer demand. You know, like car companies were maybe not the first, but they were pioneers in the concept that, you know what, we will just tell you what you want through marketing.
Yeah.
Like, we can control the market's demand by just telling you what you demand. And it will work. And they've been extremely effective at it. So you look at car commercials, if you watch television, they're all SUVs. And if they have a sedan in them, it's like, oh, also we have one. But it's like, they're not the star almost ever. Only luxury sedans are ever the star.
And they're always in an empty city.
And they're always, that's true.
But we already had somebody with a wagon go through with all the Google phones.
Yep. They discovered that first.
No,
but I think it's important to understand that when you see an SUV commercial, that is them building demand. And then they justify the killing of more reasonable sized cars in favor of these SUVs because they've created the demand. And now this is what people are going out to. So it's an insidious and evil conspiracy.
Dude, cars have always been that way. They're the ones who made jaywalking illegal. They're the ones who made us feel like streets weren't for people.
They're the ones who coined the phrase jaywalking.
Yeah, they're the ones who have perpetuated this notion that streets are for cars, and people buy it all the time. If you're watching this and have made it this far, you probably don't believe that.
Cheers!
To you. Like 5 people watching.
But it's we have this enormous problem because even if we were in some kind of perfect world to ban SUVs somehow, there's so many SUVs in the world and they're not going anywhere.
Well, and what I hate is this notion that this technology is going to fix it, right? Like, if we put a camera in front of the car and, like, that will mitigate future car collisions, but it doesn't help all of the people who are on the road right now. And maybe them knowing that they have an enormous blind spot in the front is some small sliver of a silver lining, but I think what we're really lacking is, like, a major awareness of how dangerous these vehicles are. And it sucks because, like, a lot of people, I think, legitimately bought into the idea that they were getting a safer car. And I you know, like, I don't... I kind of feel bad for them, right? Like, I think they're, you know, especially because I think a lot of bigger cars are marketed towards people who have kids and are carrying kids and all their stuff. And, like, I don't believe that all these, like, I hate to stereotype, but, like, SUV driving moms, like, they don't want to know that they can't see 13 children in front of them. Like, they want to think that they're being safe. And I think this is just really devastating, and we don't actually have a fix for all the cars that are on the road. There's not a camera that can retroactively be added to your front of your car.
Right. I mean, that's literally what the Ride the Ducks solution was after they killed.
Oh, God, Jesus. We still have them on the roads right now. What the hell? Sorry, I was not supposed to swear. Hell is a pretty minor swear, but...
No, what the fuck? Why are Ride the Ducks still on Seattle streets?
Jesus Christ.
This is one of the biggest failures of street safety policy our city has ever experienced. So there was one year where Ride the Ducks, through one incident, was responsible for 1/4 of all Seattle road deaths for the entire year. And we couldn't even say, you're done, you don't get to drive on our streets anymore. We couldn't do that. Every single time I see a Ride the Duck, I get so mad. I can't believe that.
Oh, and then they always say some bullshit about like spandex riders on the Berkham, and you're like, I'm wearing fucking jeans, dude. I've got a child in front. Like, what do you want from me?
The spandex highway. And you look over and like there's like a bunch of tourists like taking a picture of you. Like, I'm going to work. What are you? Stop.
Okay.
I'm not.
All right.
I'm not a zoo animal. Anyway,
okay, we should depart. From
I hate Ride the Ducks.
We hit a nerve.
I hate Ride the Ducks. I want their business to fail completely. Yeah, I want them
It's
to.
not a fun tourist activity. There's so many better things. You know what? I'm gonna plug Argosy Cruises. That was more fun.
Argosy Cruise was great.
Legit fun.
And they go through the locks, which is way cooler.
Anyway, we'll digress.
Fuck the Ducks. All right. Oh well, this is. Wait. Then we should skip ahead to this one. This is related.
Oh yeah! Yay!
Yay!
So yay, climate protesters! All of you.
Oh wait, hold on. We're not.
We
didn't show them. Sorry, I didn't. Hey, there we go.
Yay, climate protesters all around the world. We love all people doing all climate protests in any shape and form, but especially the folks who came out to protest the car industry.
This doesn't happen enough.
Let's do more of this.
Yeah, it's interesting like that. I don't know if it's because of ties to unions or something, what the excuse is, but there's, people are fully ready to protest like a coal company or like a oil pipeline, but we're not ready to protest cars, which is where that oil ends up. Mm-hmm. And that should change, and that's why I like this story a lot. There's another photo that's not in here, in this version that I saw elsewhere, of someone had poured like a bunch of blood on the hood of one of the fancy new cars. And people were like, well, that's an electric car, why are you doing that? It's like...
Still killing people.
Electric cars kill people too.
And also I think electric cars can be better. However, they're still taking up a lot of space. They're still monopolizing that politics of space in an urban environment. They're also still dangerous. I think that the fact is, if you can travel 60 miles per hour or more very easily in a given place, that's too fast.
Yeah,
it's dangerous.
Yeah, I mean the car infrastructure and car dominance is what is the limiting factor in so much of walking, biking, and transit use in our country. And electric cars don't change that at all.
No.
I mean, I'm not against electric cars because, there's lots of benefits to them. There's...
and not everywhere is a place that has the kind of density that you need to really be able to comfortably walk or bike,
mm-hmm.
Or the transit infrastructure. Sure, but electric cars aren't the end all be all of solutions, and I really wish people would stop pretending like they are.
Yeah, and to get back to our other version about our other point about the car companies. Sure, car companies are making they have one electric car,
mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to be the company that doesn't have one, I guess. But those aren't the cars that they are creating the demand for. They're not running giant, endless advertising campaigns for their electric cars.
And also, a lot of places that have electric cars, like, they're still running on crappy energy systems. Like, no
Oh, wait.
offense. Okay.
Wait, because
Wait,
that's this story.
That's this story. Here we
I'm
go.
gonna blow it up. Oh,
Wow.
too much.
Transportation. It is still a problem for our emissions. I think it's, it's really easy in Washington and King County and Seattle to sit here and focus on transportation as one of our greenhouse gas emissions because we know it's this target. We know it's where our pollution is coming from. But then you see this, and this is the United States, right? Like, transportation is still our problem.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's easier to transition a coal power plant to natural gas.
Mm-hmm. Still not a solution.
Still not a solution, but
Let's be clear.
it's like one of those things. Like, okay, well, you're better than coal, but that was
Low
a low bar. Oh my
Come on,
god,
we can do better.
But the result is that, like, so if you see the power emissions here that goes down here, that's because so much of what happened during Obama's time was coal plants turning to natural gas, and that's fracked gas. The extraction of it is horrible, but
Polluting
probably not as bad as taking the top off of a mountain in the
But
Alleghenies.
let's be clear, natural gas pollutes during the extraction, it pollutes during the transportation, and it pollutes during the usage.
Yeah, it is. It's like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, maybe it's better than the most horrible thing that we could be doing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't. Well, I guess it's like the most horrible thing we could be doing this side of like whale oil.
No
But, like,
one's talking about whale oil.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like literally like whale oil, coal. I guess natural gas is like significantly below that.
But like, but we've got a lot of work to do, right? And like, I think it's frustrating here because transportation isn't an isolated thing, right? Like, there's so much that's related to transportation. It's about housing affordability. It's about jobs. It's about land use. It's about the kind of places that people live.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a place where we have a lot of opportunity to change that and shift that. And, like, honestly, not everywhere in the country is in the same boat, right? Like, we've tried to map out, if we were visiting our parents, like, what would be walking distance from our parents' house, and then, like, what all we could walk to in our current house in Seattle. And it's, like, kind of ridiculous. It's, like, large swaths of the city, you know. And so I
love you, Mom.
I mean, my parents live kind of out there in the burbs too. You can walk to things, two things. That one market.
It's a long walk.
It's not short, but it's doable. You know, so I think, like, transportation isn't in a vacuum.
No. Well, and also, you know, the equity issues related to transportation and power here, and industry actually, are
so
all
related.
intertwined. They're all intertwined. It is intersectional as hell. Like, you know, I think back to, you know, there's parts of the St. Louis metro area. So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I think I'm actually wearing a St. Louis shirt right now.
Are you visible? Is this?
Yeah, it's visible.
Oh yeah.
Like, there are neighborhoods I remember growing up where when it rained, the rain was so acidic from the exhaust from power plants nearby that the rain would eat the paint off of your car. So if you didn't park in a garage, like, you could tell, like, people would just drive around these cars where the paint was all faded, and like there'd be like pockmarks almost in it. And I mean, essentially acid burns is what it was. And it was because the rain was so acidic from the power plants. That were, you know, that's going in the air, that's going in their kids' lungs. You know, their kids have higher rates of asthma now because of this. Like, and those places also happen to be the places where you had to drive because they're undesirable to live in a place where the rain eats the paint off your car. Like, that's not a great place. And so it's not a dense populated area where there's good transit service and, you know, all of the factors that play into why people rely on cars, why people have access to food, why people have access to recreation and good health and clean air. They're all tied together with environmentalist issues here, and you can see it right in this graph that like they're all connected.
And climate justice is so much about really looking at the folks who are impacted, and I think this is where there's so much work to do to really lift up the folks who've been impacted by environmental racism and say, you know the solutions and you know what will support your community. And I think it's in everyone's best interest to really support the people doing climate justice work. And I think there's so much to do in that intersection of livability and industry. Where is industry, and how is this really impacting people's lives and public health? There's so many things coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Just so happens to be there's food deserts, like all these things are coming together, and we've got so much work to do. And this isn't just in like Seattle's got a lot of work to do. We're not exempt from this. We've got a lot of the same environmental racism problems. Like, I think we like to think that we don't have these issues. We do. St. Louis, I think, has
our clean energy comes from hydroelectric,
right,
which
that has lots of
was
problems.
very damaging to the river ecosystem.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, I guess it's better than coal.
And I think there's just a lot of opportunities for everyone to do better work and just do, do better. We really have to do better.
So for Seattle, I don't have the graph in front of me, but transportation is significantly higher than everything else on this for the Seattle version because we have so much hydroelectric for our power. Really drives down the heating homes and things like that.
Yeah.
That
still a lot of work. It's like housing and buildings are still a large part of our greenhouse gas emissions, but transportation is a pretty big one too. So I think
it's the biggest here.
It is, but we still need to be tackling our power sources.
Yes.
We still need to be tackling new housing, buildings.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about natural gas bans?
It's a great idea.
The reason it's becoming more of a talking point. I'm hearing it more and more. People are imagining like what would a city look like if we banned natural gas, and this seems really extreme.
But it isn't. Like, and the reality is like, so if we want to meet our goals of reducing our emissions by 2030, that means that we need to take a lot of steps. The first step is not creating new problems, not creating new infrastructure that supports fossil fuel. First step, right? Like this is, when we talk about a natural gas ban, it really is an early step in the process of weaning ourselves off fossil fuels, right? Like, how do we not make the problem worse? So electrification in Seattle is supported mostly by hydroelectric, which has its issues, but is a renewable energy source. And so it is possible to do a lot more electric buildings. And I think we are looking at figuring out what that means, right? Like, what does that mean for Seattle City Light? What does that mean for, I'm scared to say this, but Puget Sound Energy? But like, what does it look like for these big energy providers for the city? And I think we're looking at electrification on a lot of different scales. It's like our house that we're in right now is fully electric. We have things like a heat pump. We have an induction oven. Those things are really scalable for our size of house, which is very small. Is it scalable for bigger, medium-sized apartment buildings, large towers. That's something.
Commercial kitchens.
Commercial kitchens. I think there's a lot to figure out. The market is, I believe, not always the solution, but I think we can see if we create these bans for natural gas bans, options for incentivizing companies to develop cool induction ovens that are affordable for commercial kitchens, systems of heating that work well for multifamily buildings. We need to see that jump in innovation. Mm-hmm. And so that has to happen, right? Like we're seeing in California a rippling wave of natural gas bans. It is where things are headed. And
this is new construction.
New construction.
So we're not like going into people's homes and being like, turn off your
gas.
gas.
Rip out your gas. I think it is really important for people to start thinking about like what are other ways that they can start to do things on their own. But no, it's not retroactive. It's just new construction.
For now.
I mean, I also think we've got to be
coming
real,
for
right?
your range.
Like, dude, induction is the shit.
It is.
We've got an induction oven, and like, it's amazing.
You're just against aluminum pots.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, your shitty pots have to go. You have to buy nice pots. But no, really, I mean, like, we're looking at something here that is an absolute requirement in the future, or now, really. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just to rely on a source of energy that in order to get it, we need to poison the water for indigenous communities and rural communities.
Well, in fracked, so that was the thing that really struck me. Colorado has a lot of frack gas. That's where I'm from. And we drove by on the way to our friend's house for New Year's. This was several years ago. A bunch of fracked gas sites. And the thing about frack gas, and then I think this is fairly insidious, is that it actually doesn't look like much. It's a field, and then there'll be like a little box or some sort of like vaguely industrial looking structure, but it's pretty small. And that is what some fracked gas land can look like. And that is something that doesn't look like a lot, right? And then you have a lot of realizations of like, oh, it's like this acre and this acre and this acre. And it's this whole space that looks like almost open space. And it is actually like land that is having some pretty substantial shifts and changes and exploitation to it.
Well, and like, you know, the fracking process doesn't like magically stop at like the fence line.
Right, yeah.
Like,
and then there's houses really close to a lot of these borders.
And the water
right?
that you're using to do that, the enormous amounts of water. Is the same water, and it's coming from the aquifer, which is being drained. So like the Front Range, which is like Denver and surrounding cities and suburbs. Is totally reliant on this thing they call the aquifer, and it's a giant underground reservoir.
Nobody knows how much is in there.
Nobody has any idea how much water is in it, but they know it's going down. And and so there's like this weird existential thing hanging over all these communities where it's like someday that might be all of it. Like it's not, and then what do we do? And so the idea of wasting water on this process is exceptionally offensive in the Front Range of Colorado.
Well, and so it's like there's this whole system of getting natural gas to houses, and that also is exploitative, right? So it's like the extraction, the transportation, and the usage. And I think we're just really looking at a time when we need to be not making our problems worse. I also feel that way about electric cars sometimes too, right? Because like we're extracting all these resources to make electric cars. They're using resources on the batteries They're using resources on the production. They're not as neutral as we want to think they are. Like, even if their overall emissions are lower than a diesel car or a gas car, like, they're still not neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, yeah. Oh man, we're diving into like climate despair.
Oh no!
Do we have anything else to lift us out, or is it all?
Wait. Is this gonna do it? No,
Oh.
that's not gonna do it.
Oh, should we talk about it though?
Yeah, let's talk about Janice.
Yeah. Yay, Janice! Hi, we met Janice. Janice is amazing.
I've met Janice a couple times.
Yeah.
Janice is awesome to talk to. Such a
Really inspiring human being who is doing incredible work in San
is
Francisco.
the policy director for the what do they call it, the Bay Area Bike Coalition, and has also ran and won a seat on the BART board, and has just been done. Like, you remember there was the person who was arrested for eating a sandwich on like the platform of the BART. It triggered this whole series of protests of like that was racist policing, and like someone can eat a sandwich on the freaking subway platform, it's fine. Mm-hmm. And so Janice is on the BART board and actually attended the protests against that, which was awesome. I mean, Janice does all kinds of really amazing work, and I really liked this story because she's being very honest and open about kind of the stress and the way that doing this kind of work has impacted her life, and the toll it takes on you personally to be so engaged in such important issues that are so huge all the time, that it's easy to forget about yourself a little bit.
Well, and also that, I think the fact that there's a lot of women who take transit and are not necessarily having their voices heard. I really love the beginning part of the article. Like, Janice Lee is 32 years old. She's a woman. She's Chinese. She's an immigrant. She's queer, right? These are her identities, and all of these identities intersect on public transit. This is a public social space, and women are taking transit, but they're not always the ones whose voices are heard. To be a woman of color, to be queer, to be an immigrant, to be representative on this board is a really important work, and it is hard. It's hard no matter who you are, because it's a job that you don't get paid for, but is taking up a lot of your time.
San Francisco Bicycle Coalition.
There.
She's the advocacy director.
So she's doing this whole amazing other scope of work for a nonprofit, probably not getting paid enough. And
then doing the BART board, which pays almost nothing.
Yeah, and it's just doing a ton of work in transportation, and that is hard. And I really appreciate this story for being honest and real. And I also think that she's passionate, and she brings this like really heartfelt and personal approach to transportation that's really needed. I think one thing that is like my ultimate pet peeve about bike people can get this way too, but no offense to transit people, but they're the worst. They are like the most nitpicky about like timetables and technical performance, but then when you talk about like what is the lived experience of someone trying to take transit, they don't always factor that in. And like, so much of why transit succeeds or fails is about that lived experience of like who feels comfortable and safe on transit, who feels supported that the transit is going where they need it to go when they need to go there. We're not all 9-to-5 workers going downtown. And like, so many transit agencies absolutely fail at acknowledging that there are other types of people taking other types of trips on transit. And to just be a person and try to bring that perspective into a major transit agency is a lot of emotional labor. We want to give Janice serious kudos for doing all of that work.
So like, we're making this video on the, so like right now in this contemporary moment, the Democratic Party has like somehow completely failed to like make an app where they can count votes in Iowa, and has kind of like thrown their whole primary system like off kilter. And then our government just acquitted Donald Trump from, he did nothing wrong. It's totally cool. And, there's so much important work to be done, and it is important, and you should still do it, of course. But also, we love you. Take care of yourself. Self-care is a radical act.
Community care.
Community care.
That's my new kind of care.
Okay, explain it. What's community care?
So self-care is a lot about like, thinking about what your self needs are, and community care is about acknowledging that we aren't pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and that we really need each other, and that I think there's a big push to just like think about how we support each other. I really appreciated a friend had a post of saying like, hey, these are some tasks that I really suck at, but here's some stuff I'm really good at, and I can help you with the things I'm good at, and you can maybe help me with the things I suck at. And it was like going to the post office and like, but I'm really good at like making sure all your finances are in a spreadsheet or whatever. Like we all have different skills, and like I think part of it is acknowledging that like we're not fully self-sufficient beings. I love self-care and love a good bubble bath, but like we also need to take care of each other, and like part of our goal is to be interconnected.
Yeah, and self-care includes relationship care.
Right.
Like that, all the parts that make you happy also. Like, it's not just bubble baths, but bubble baths, I guess, are nice. I don't really like that.
You're not a bubble bath person, but I am a bubble bath person.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard, like, you continuing to go another day, fight another day, is more important sometimes than the fight today. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the ultimate mission point that I'm trying to make about that. But and that's not me speaking to Janice. Janice knows exactly what she's doing. But
I think it's just about like the motion of person who might be frustrated and depressed. And I think sometimes like I felt this way since 2016, that like, is transportation worthwhile to spend my time on? Like, we're looking at a moment when human rights violations are rampant, and my heart is aching over all kinds of things that are happening, and it doesn't take away the fact that like transportation is still a really big climate problem. It doesn't take away the fact that transportation is still like a source of killing lots of people. Like there's, I think there's these moments when I come back to the why of what I'm interested in doing. Yeah,
I know. There are days where my job is to put out a Seattle bike blog post, and I'll read a story about these are the conditions for unaccompanied minors who are detained at the border. Sleeping with emergency blankets and like dog piles, basically dying of preventable illnesses because they don't have access to healthcare. Horrific things. And then like my job today is to like write about how the mayor's proposed revamping of the bicycle 5-year plan is like not as ambitious as it used to be, and like I 100% believe that's an important story. Like the bike plan being scaled back is totally an important story. But how am I supposed to care about that when there's kids in cages? And somehow you have to. Like, it is still important. Like, kids in cages doesn't mean that the bicycle 5-year plan of Seattle is not important.
On a scale, we can say kids in cages is really more important.
Right. Like, but my job is to write about the bicycle plan of Seattle.
I did not treat that in my
But sometimes I'm like, should that be my job? Like, should I...
No.
Do I need to quit? Like, it's like, it's hard. It's hard. And like, you have to have faith that your community is there, and that there are people working on all kinds of issues, and you have to be there for them when they need someone to be there. You need to be a good ally. You know, you don't say, well, I'm going to ignore that issue because I'm going to focus on this thing. But sometimes it is a little bit of an escape to be like, you know what? I'm going to talk about bike lane today because I can't handle the idea that our government just acquitted Donald Trump.
No.
You know, like...
Yeah, that's real.
So I'm going to talk about bike lane because bike lanes are cool and it's good. They're good things.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, too, because I think it also creates this space where, especially, like, the federal government being where it is, it makes it harder to trust local government that they're willing to do the right thing. And I think that's something that, like, is really challenging to deal with on a local level of, like, we actually need our local government to function and work for us and to do the right thing and to be accountable to people's needs. And it can feel really hard when you have a leader who's as corrupt and pretty vile and detestable as our current leader is.
And white supremacist.
Yeah.
Overtly.
It's bad. So thanks for sticking with us. We have derailed into.
It's okay. Well,
this is just you're just like at our house
real.
on a.
It's real.
On a night. This
like
is what we.
All the
would
stuff
talk
in this
about.
story is real. I mean.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But you know what would save all of the problems? Everything we've talked about could be solved.
I'm so excited.
They could be solved by one. What if I told you?
Okay.
What if I told you that everything we just talked about could go away?
Including the acquittal of Donald Trump.
Yes. Yes. I'm willing to make that statement. And all it would take is the purchase of a single product.
I'm in.
You're interested?
Interested.
Well, have
Sign
you ever
me up.
heard of car helmets?
Oh my god, I love a car helmet. You know, car helmets are so fashionable. You can get them in all kinds of different colors. You can get them to match your car. Like, if you want it to be the same color as your car.
I think you can. I think there's only ever been one produced ever. It was by some dude in Australia, and I think he sold like 200 of them. And now they're like really expensive on eBay because they're like collector items.
I was just trying to like mock the world of like bike helmets because people want bike helmets to be really fashionable, but damn, I gotta love me a good car helmet.
There we go, right there. A motoring helmet.
I'm into it. You know how many times? So like I don't drive really at all.
You have not driven in how many years?
Since 2011, May.
Damn.
It's because I'm stubborn AF. For real. I'm just like, no.
Mitt Romney had yet to declare his candidacy for president. The last time you drove a car.
Yeah, so that's the last time I drove. But so, like, I'm really stubborn. But, man, I also don't even ride in cars a lot. My dad always gives me shit about that. I'd be like, well, you must just get rides a lot. And it's like, actually, no. Turns out I live in a city with functional transit network. And I can ride my bike and I can walk. Sucka. Anyway, the point is...
We love you, too.
We do. I do love my dad. He does build highways. Anyway, I've digressed. A good car helmet would make me feel safer. I do not personally feel very safe in a car going 60 miles per hour. I think I've read too many Vision Zero documents, knowing about like safety collisions to think of myself as safe in a car. I always think about dying whenever I'm going on a highway at 60 miles per hour. It's very similar to people who have flight anxiety. I feel that way about a highway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is not out of place.
I know, and that's why I'm a big fan of a motoring helmet.
So, this came up because the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, was suggesting that we should have bicycle helmet laws. Or someone had asked him about it or something. Let's see. I forget the exact context in which it came up. But some reporter followed up a question like, would you mandate car helmets for people driving. And he, like, I think he didn't really know what to say. So he was like, I don't know, I'll, like, look into it. And so that generated this headline. So Forbes is usually, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Forbes is, like, not a legitimate website. Like, they publish, like, whatever, basically. But Carlton Reed, I happen to know, is trustworthy. So that's the only reason I'm showing a Forbes link here. Is because I happen to know the author.
Like top 10 resume tips from Forbes.
So they, they have no quality control,
cool.
editors, no copy editing, no fact checking. Like,
so you're saying their lifestyle section is probably all central.
There are things straight up published in Forbes that are published by people who are paid by whatever company it is that they're promoting in the article that they're writing.
So you should do a Seattle Bike Blog Forbes article.
You know what? I would make a lot more money if I just wrote things that people paid me to write.
Yeah.
I'm the worst at business. All right.
It's
From
true.
now on, this Bike News Roundup video series is sponsored by General Motors.
Turns out he loves SUVs.
Did you know the Suburban is officially now the longest running make of car in the history of the world?
Why do you know Carfax?
Because I am paid by General Motors to know these facts.
Okay. Let's just talk about the joy of
car helmets. So, but here's the thing, like, so this is very real for us in Seattle and King County because we have this all-ages helmet law, which is extremely rare. And it's sort of like the ultimate trolling.
We can't talk about it because it never goes well.
Yeah, it's not, you can't talk about it. It's like, once you have it on the books, it's like impossible. Like, no politician wants to be the anti-safety politician. Like
you're gonna kill people.
So, like, there's so little political upside to being the person who tries to overturn this law that it seems like it's just entrenched, even though anyone who looks into it very far quickly realizes that we have no evidence that bike helmet laws bike helmet laws have ever increased safety outcomes for a population. You know, it's like one of those things where it's like there's anecdotes of like people that wearing a helmet has helped.
Children, often helpful, right? Because kids crash their bikes.
Even that's fuzzy, but yes.
Whatever. I'm gonna make my kid wear a helmet.
Sure, but we're talking about the law here.
Yeah. I'm just saying. This is why you can't talk about helmets.
This is why you can't talk about helmets. There's so many. But anyway, every argument in favor of bicycle helmets applies to being in a car.
Everyone.
Single one of them. The number one cause of death for people inside cars, head injury. Like,
obviously.
If you wore a helmet, maybe you'd have less head injury. Mm-hmm. If it saves just one life, isn't it worth it? And people laugh off the idea of wearing a motoring helmet.
Because they got a car.
Because they got a car. But yeah, but your car goes 80. I was going to say 60, but it's really 80.
But I go like
80, 90.
How fast are you on my bike? Like maybe downhill 19 to 20 miles an hour.
And so I'm not saying don't wear a helmet when you bike because it's your choice. But if you're going to make it legally required for someone on a bike, there's no reason why it shouldn't be legally required for someone in a car. And it would be enormously unpopular because the people who really like bicycle helmet laws are often people who don't ride a bike. And so it's I think it's the perfect thought experiment for people who are completely convinced about bike helmet laws. I think like, well, then come up with a single reason why we shouldn't have car helmet laws. And in a weird way, so this whole story was written from the perspective of like, well, sure, it's a good idea. We should do it. Which is all sort of tongue-in-cheek, because like everyone knows this is never going to happen. But, I mean, why not?
I was thinking about when we went to Chiltron's. Is this a terrible story to tell? You know.
Oh, sure. Tell it. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we set up the...
All right. So our kid was born really early, we had a lot of extra doctor appointments. After our kid got out of the NICU, we felt really cooped up. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a cargo bike. It's got a special box in the front. We had a special attachment drilled into our cargo bike to have our car seat installed into our bike. Children who do not have enough neck strength to wear a helmet cannot bike. Our child did not have enough neck strength to be in a helmet, but she was in a car seat, and we had her in a car seat in a bike, very securely attached. When we went to Children's, and we had a whole talk about with our doctor about it, and our doctor was like, well, was she wearing a helmet? And we're like, well, actually, like, kind of you should know that she wasn't, because if she was wearing a helmet, it would, like, close off her airway, because her head would be like this, because she was in a car seat.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, I don't know what my point is there.
It's just that there's our culture is so, so entrenched, the idea that if you have a child, especially an infant, like, you have to transport them by car. And people have convinced themselves that there's these ways to make car transportation for your infant really safe.
Which it isn't.
Car
seats are safer than a car.
Going 80 on a freeway
is not safe
it's not
for your
safe.
baby.
It's not safe for your baby. Certainly not safer than biking your child in a cargo bike down the Verkillen Trail.
Yeah, which is what we were doing.
So, but there's this, people aren't used to that idea, and it makes people very nervous. Especially, so at this time, like our child was like, she had like a feeding tube like in her nose. That, like, went all the way down her nose, into her stomach, which I had to learn how to install, which is the most horrible thing I've ever done in my entire life. And maybe the most horrible thing I ever do in my entire life was stick the feeding tube down my child's nose into her stomach. It is.
Nurses,
I like wake up with nightmares sometimes thinking about the feeling of it.
I know, it's bad.
Like there's one day where she pulled it out, and we just decided, you know what, we're done.
Turns out, let's see what happens if we eat on your own. Worked out well for us.
She's good.
Not all kids. Our kid worked out.
She also had like oxygen, so we had to like have these oxygen like canisters like in a backpack, like attached to her like nose, like taped onto her cheek, feeding tube coming out, and we're like biking her, and people were just it was weird.
They're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
We're like, look, this is what we need right now.
We just it's like this is how our life used to be, and we needed a taste of like our life the way that we knew it.
And we also wanted to believe that like our child can be a part of our life the way we want it to be, right? Like, our life isn't around a car. We don't own a car. We have a child. We want that to be okay. So we made it okay. And we were safe about it, right? Like, we weren't idiots. Like, many places we took our child in the stroller in the bus, or we wore her in a baby carrier and walked. But Children's is very easy to get to by bike, as noted by their incredible mode shift, which has a phenomenal rate of women commuting to Seattle Children's by bike. And it's part because they're off the Verkillen Trail. So, we weren't totally irresponsible parents by just like shoving our kid on a bike. We had her in a nice car seat. We had her situated in a bolted on Dutch style attachment for our big cargo bike, and it was a thing that felt really powerful. But she wasn't wearing a helmet, right? Now she wears a helmet.
Yeah, and that's just funny. So like I don't people who work in the medical industry with children, like I understand why they're so concerned and focused on bike helmets, because you see one child come in with a serious head injury from biking, that's gonna leave a lasting impact on you. Like, what a horrific thing to deal with in your work life, and to see and to witness what that does to the family. And I mean, it's a horrible thing to imagine. But I think what this experience pointed out to us is like, but you have this enormous blind spot around cars, where it's like, you know, our child's in a car seat, in a bike.
Though we're only really ever going, I think even...
And like, if they were in the same exact car seat in a car going 80 miles per hour, it would be fine. But if it's in a bike, then you're worried that they don't have a helmet on.
You know, I mean, I think that's the other thing is, like, especially when you're a parent, and especially when we were first biking with her, so much of it was, like, route selection and speed. I don't think in the first few months of biking her, I even went over 15 miles an hour, you know? Like, it was just like, we're just gonna slowly take it beat by beat. Yep. And even now, like, now that she's 2 and has a helmet and can sit and can, like, totally talk about her experience in the bike, you know, we still don't go that fast. And that's what we know about safety, right? Is that safety is around speed. The speed of your collision and matters so much more than so many other factors, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you're going slower, you can respond at a more human pace. When you're going 60 to 80 miles per hour, you can't respond at a human pace.
No, it's not safety to drive 80 miles per hour. It's not safe to drive 70 miles per hour. And our culture is dependent on all of us believing that it is safe to do that. And it just isn't. It's dangerous, and that's why people die. And if you die in a collision on the freeway, we all just are like, sucks to be you, but, you know, yes, you lost the lottery. Like, there's some sort of, like, twisted, you know, dice rolling going on, and some of us just have to die. Like, sorry, just, like, in order to, like, maintain our lifestyle, we require an annual human sacrifice of 40,000 people.
Have you read Ursula Le Guin's the short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Romulus?
I have not.
Oh, it's a really good one.
Can you tell us about it?
It's a short story about this really wonderful, it's been ages since I read it, but like this really perfect seeming town. But to live in that perfect town, at a certain point, you get to learn that there is like a sacrifice of this, like, I believe it's like a child or young person in a basement that is just basically tortured or and so like all of this pleasantry is based on like the torture or death of other people, and you can choose to stay or you can choose to go. And like so much of car culture is based on that, right?
I'm sure that's not pleasant, but yes,
car culture is not pleasant, but it's like if you want to believe in easy convenience and the cheapness of it all, you can ignore the cost of human life.
Yeah. Except you walk into any room in America and you say, raise your hand if you or someone you love has been seriously injured or killed in a traffic collision.
And everyone will raise their hand.
Everyone will raise their hand. It doesn't matter Democrat, Republican, rich, poor. It doesn't matter. Hands will go up. And we just accept this, and we shouldn't. God, we ended on a downer. We're supposed to end on a happy note. We ended on a downer note.
Do we make it a happy note? Do we have anything else to go?
Okay.
Happy.
We're going to try to spontaneously add something happy. No, not Buttigiaj. That's not going to work. Yakima immigrants over bikes.
I've got
no.
one. Oh.
Okay. That's not going to work.
How about Cascade Advocacy Leadership Institute? You could do that. That's fun.
Oh. Okay. Was that in here?
Yeah, it's right there. I'm just thinking.
Okay, we can do this one. If you want to make things better,
sign up.
Oh wait, hold on. Wait, I gotta bring it up. There we go.
So full disclosure, many years ago, I was in charge of this program, and the thing is, it's a really good program. Bike advocacy is really important.
What was your role when you were in charge?
Oh, I don't remember.
We had 2 titles, I think.
I had like statewide engagement director was the last one I had, and it was really about just planning some awesome trainings to help people learn how to be better advocates. I think there's a lot of really great ways to learn about political power, learn about campaign processes, and figure out how to organize. People have taken this in lots of really different ways. People have ended up on boards like the Seattle Bike Advisory Board or the Transit Advisory Board or Pedestrian Advisory Board. People have also come onto this work through coming up with their own kind of events. The Moxie Summer Jam has some alum of this program, all kinds of things. There's lots of people who do good stuff who have gone through it. Be creative. Go for it.
And Tamar is awesome. If you haven't met Tamar yet, this is your chance. And it's I've spoken at these before, and they're always really fun. It seems like people who are there get a lot out of it, and it's really cool to see. What I love about this program is that it is about training people in the tools of advocacy. How can you make change in your neighborhood, workplace, whatever level it is that you want to work in? How can you be empowered to be the one who organizes? Because, I think lots of people care about an issue, but they assume that like someone else is better suited to do this than I am. And this program says, take this program and you'll be that person. And it's brilliant. And they don't require that you go on to do stuff for Cascade or that you put Cascade's name on everything that you do. Like, it's not about, I think that's what's amazing about it, is that it's not about Cascade getting credit for this. It's about they're just trusting that if you take this program, whatever you do will probably be
better
in their interests also.
Well, and I think it's a really good
awesome
opportunity for people to figure out how to do something that they're called to do. And I think people can take it in lots of different ways. I've seen people be really focused on the social elements. I've seen people be really focused on policy and campaigns and getting involved there. And I'm just going to throw it out there. We're going to see some campaigns come up in the next few years. So this is the time to like hop on board. You can make a difference. And
yeah, it's a really neat thing. Honestly, I'm surprised it's not more often copied. I think lots of people have copied it.
Lots of different programs have manifested in different ways. It's hard to say where they all stemmed from, but I think there's lots of different borrowing and sharing in training organizations, and lots of awesome collective knowledge in the alumni group, and smart people, passionate people, good networks, great cohorts. So there's your positive note. You
can make change. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. We should bring the names back. Hold on.
Oh.
I can do this. Hey.
And you should do a subscribe pitch.
Yeah.
The things.
Gonna.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, so you should definitely hit subscribe on YouTube. I need like,
700?
700 more subscribers before they will start giving me money. So I don't think I'm ever gonna make a lot of money in this, but it would be cool to make like a little bit. We'll see. So yeah,
you can
definitely
subscribe to the Seattle Bike Blog.
But also you should subscribe, and then there's a little bell. You hit that, then it'll like tell you every time we post something, which is especially important because we're thinking about maybe future Bike News Roundup videos like this might be streamed live.
Oh, horrifying.
So you could actually like, if you get notified when it happens, then you could like tune in. You could like ask us questions. We can answer them on air. Oh, I'm all out.
I've got a lot left if you want them.
Which I think would be really fun. I've never done anything like that. This is me just, if you have any thoughts about the format, please leave feedback for me in the YouTube comments or in the Bike Blog comments, either one. Thanks for watching. You can support this work by becoming a Seattle Bike Blog supporter. Just go to seattlebikeblog.com and you'll see a supporter link on the navigation bar. It'll tell you all the details. Starting at $5 a month, just kind of pitch in and know that you're helping this work continue. I'm 100% independent. I answer to nobody, which allows me to be as honest as possible about, and write the things that I think are important. And I think that that's been very valuable to the city. And so I hope if you think so too, that you'll, pitch in a little bit to help it keep going, because it turns out that there's not a lot of money in honesty and independence. So everyone who is supporting is really making this happen. And so if you're already a supporter, thank you. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks
Peace.
for having me.
Yeah. Drive home safe. Bye.
Bye.
Oh wait, we gotta do the outro video.
Bye.
Bye.